the 21st day of October 2024, of course. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to be your host tonight. I'm Dana, and I hope you're having a great day. Enjoy them where you can. You can call in at these shows, 709-589-4406, 709-589-4406. It takes me a minute or 7 or 10 or 20 to get everything to go clickety-click and all the other pretty stuff. So we're going to cover dead whales, dead sea lions right away, and we'll move on to nuclear. And the reason we cover that is it's a bit complicated if you don't know much about the topic and you're trying to look at it yourself. But if you come here, then I'll provide the documentation. Then that'll keep you on the right path, and you can extrapolate a lot of things on your own after. Let me see here. Well, last night they kicked me off my stream, and I was recording it too, so that really wasn't very nice. Let's say that much. I'm going to do it again tonight. So this is 2014 beluga population. So NOAA said it counted 28 whale strikes in northeastern water between 2006 2010 worldwide, the National Marine Fisheries Service. Survey covering 1975 through 2002 seen 292 records of confirmed or possible, maybe perhaps conjecture, ship strikes to large whales. Look at 2014. So this story was 2014. But there was another story about this in 2014. Ship strikes. Should have been this one first. I have to come to the other screen for you. There have been about 1,200 reports of whales and boats colliding since a worldwide database launched in 2007. So that was total numbers, though, recorded. So now they're claiming every other whale is hit by a ship. Because whales are just stupid, right? They're like slots. They can't get out of the way, apparently. According to the experts. Let's keep going here. So, in 2014, 2015-16, when they found pilot whales, their stomachs were empty. This one was necropsies performed on 8 whales at Lover's Key on Monday and Tuesday. Showed all animals had empty stomachs. And there was a mass stranding the day before. The whales that died in the Everglades also had empty stomachs. And we've seen that in the same thing in 2015 in Australia and everywhere else in 2017. By 2018, they stopped reporting on the contents of pilot whales in particular because they needed that to manipulate the population with. Okay, so here we are today. This is a story from today. And we're going to cover some post-Fukushima die-offs to help articulate this after, and why we're associating it with Fukushima. Not all whale deaths are associated with Fukushima, or birds, or seals, or sea lions. But unfortunately, quite a few are now. City of Cape Town warned beachgoers against harassing dolphins, whales that washed ashore. So it sounds like a pandemic of whales and dolphins washing ashore, doesn't it? Because it is. But when you look at this whale, which is a humpback whale, I was taken aback by how skinny the tail section is, because that's the prime giveaway, right? Because it's bloated, you can't tell whether it has a peanut head or not. And only the elite are allowed to go near the whales for the last number of years, we've noticed worldwide. But when you're looking at that tail, that's not a very big tail. And yeah, we see a lot of these types of pictures. And we're usually 100% right when we make the proper assessment like that. The city of Cape Town received 11 complaints from residents last week. They reported that people were approaching. They were going up to the sea animals. They had 11 complaints because it's not just whales and dolphins. The massive amount of seals and sea lions and cormorants and other species in South Africa have been quite stunning too. So they had 11 complaints. People were going up and getting their selfies and riding the animals. We call them nuclear scientists or academics for the last decade anyway. Cape Town beachgoers have been warned to stay away from whales and dolphins that washed ashore. Get away from the whales. The British are brutal. Like, they're brutal. They take over that whole part of the country when they get a dead animal on the beach. It's owned by the monarchy, right? And the vomit is worth like $500,000 in these things. These incredible creatures, these wonderful, amazing, going extinct whales. In particular, there's so many species that are going extinct. It's incredible. And this is, when you cover as much as we do on this site here, we cover it all, we gather it all. And you see this arrogance from these people that is, you wonder if they've ever seen a whale before, or if they've ever seen the ocean before. This incredible arrogance from the academics that are in charge. And then the lies that they tell you are consistent, the same lies every time. Global warming, climate change. And whenever you do a necropsy, it might take years and years before you actually hear about it again. And because we're at this all the time, we manage to do the follow-ups quite often. Stay away from the whales and dolphins that washed ashore, or frolic, or playing 900 feet from the beaches. I think the biggest enemy to the whales, besides nuclear industry, which broke the food chain now, and we're seeing all the emaciated animals. This year there have been high numbers of humpback whale sightings close to the shore. Well, not really, because there's 7,000 just died of starvation. And so the reason they're showing up along your shoreline is because they can't find food on their normal migratory route. And we know this because we tracked it nonstop for years and years and years. We do it 12 months a year, 5 days a week if we're not out doing research expeditions. And unfortunately, I've been pretty sick the last couple of years, pretty rough times. On Monday, a dead humpback whale washed ashore on Long Beach, South Africa. Like, we've covered all, just mass die-offs and the complacency of these people. They refuse to acknowledge that nuclear could play any part in breaking the food chain. And that's not an accident. We see this symmetrically throughout the media, the universities, and the government mouthpieces. Normal occurrence for this time of the year. It's not a normal occurrence pre-Fukushima. It's a normal occurrence post-Fukushima, but it's not normal pre-Fukushima. It's normal post-Fukushima for sure. But it's not normal because the animals are all emaciated. So here's another story from United Kingdom. Walker finds, and I just hate that terminology, right? Walker finds a dead whale. They denigrate everything they touch, don't they? Walker finds a dead whale on a beach. Well, why is his spine sticking like that? Where's his blubber toe? And when you look at the tail, I was just flabbergasted. Nothing preyed on the animals. There's no bite marks or anything like that. You don't see any birds on the beach there. This animal clearly, it's the clearest case of emaciation I've ever seen. And when you look at the tail, you can actually see like a 90-degree angles of the bone, how the bones are. So if this was a skeleton, that's what the bone would look like, right? But this animal died of starvation. And people are so complacent now for the last dozen years or so. It's just normal. Now it's normal. Whatever, who cares? They're always dying. They've always been dying here. No, they haven't. So that's clearly emaciation you're looking at. I can show you many examples of whales that have been there for 6 months and haven't broken down this much because they had blubber. This one didn't. That's emaciation. Initial thoughts based on size, shape, are that it would be a minke whale, a species found regularly off the northeast coast. No, it's not regularly found off the coast. You know very little about these whales. You're very rare. There's only been post-Fukushima that you got any documentation on it. You would never see them close to the shore. And so the academic colleagues wave down so they can celebrate more dead whales. Algae bloom kills hundreds of sea lions off California. The domoic acid story is back. And so they've been using this domoic acid story in 2014, 15, 16, 2017, 18. They were using it for just about everything. And so they were taking this test, but they don't actually have the documentation that proves it's domoic acid that's causing this. They just regurgitate that same narrative. And because we do a follow-up, and so when the necropsies come out a year or 2 years later, we always get it. Not always, but the majority of the times. And what we'd seen, it was never domoic acid a single friggin' time. In 2014 to 2017 anyway. And in those areas, there was... we were doing research expeditions at the same time for 4 to 5 months a year. And up by Alaska, there was, in Canadian and Alaska, there was over a million common murres had showed up, emaciated. And they eat anchovies and squid and sardines and krill, which are like big shrimp, can live up to 10 years. And they're big migratory feeders, right? So they chase the migratory. But when they get to the coastline, there's thousands of species. There's 480 species of worms. There's endless amounts of other species. There's 30,000 species of insects in the Pacific tropical coastline. Well, there was before Fukushima come along. And so they showed up emaciated, but at the same time there was over 1 million Cassini auklets, which were migrating to Australia. And that was part of their coastline. They would do that whole British Columbia, Alaska coastline on the way there. And they showed up emaciated, and they're microscopic feeders. So you had two completely different spectrums of the food chain. And in 2022, on the east coast of Canada, where I'm to, and I was investigating it as it was happening, it was over 600 miles of coastline. In every community, I went into the local shops. They call them gossip. Got all these little tiny communities of generations of the same people, families. And so all the gossip goes in the gas station and out the door again, or the local shop. And so I would go and visit each one of them on each community along that coastline, 2022, in a snowstorm too. And they were talking about all these birds clearly emaciated. And that fisheries and forestries were coming by every day with cardboard boxes and picking up the dead ones that were washing up in the community and the rivers. They were going all the way up to rivers and dying, and they were all emaciated. But at the same time, and we assumed there was at least 1 million of them, they downplayed it. They suggested that there was 200 miles of pack ice, and so the birds couldn't get any open water. But I was there, and we took documentation of it. There was no pack ice whatsoever. Well, there was a little bit on the coastline, say maybe a quarter mile of pack ice. And pack ice is the brine salt chunky of ice. big as a car, say, for instance, right? And you might get, it's not unusual to get 200 miles of pack ice, and that pack ice, when the wind is blown in on the coastline, will scrub the top 30 feet of the coastline. It'll scrub it. So every snail and mussel and sea urchin is just, except for ones in the cracks, are exterminated. And then in the spring, it's a massive bloom of species. And you'll see all the seagulls and everything feeding in the tidal zones every low tide. Now, if you want to find a seagull, you got to go to McDonald's because there's nothing in the tide zones. So the algae bloom kills hundreds of sea lions off California, which reminds me of another recent story we'll talk about in a minute. Hundreds of sea lions off the coast of California were poisoned this year amid a highly unusual algae bloom / domoic acid, which they tried to blame on all the big mass die-offs in 2014, 15, 16, and 17, and it never came true for a single one. It was starvation. That it persisted in the southern and central parts of the state into October. So this was unbelievable, because normally it only lasts a few weeks at best. Maybe linked to warming and changing ocean conditions. And so, that's like throwing a big turd in the punch bowl at a party. That kind of statement. It's a garbage can diagnosis, right? They refuse to acknowledge that we had a major event. They harm sea life when algae produces neurotoxic chemical that can be taken up by the fish and crustaceans and absorbed by the larger animals that eat them. It's 100% true. Red tide, we know what red tide is. It usually only lasts a couple of days, not a couple of weeks, by the way. After U.S. West Coast proliferation of algae, sometimes called red tide, usually peaks, but the only fish you're worried about, or the only species you're worried about, is shellfish, because they're microscopic feeders, right? So they'll bioaccumulate a lot more than a fish. A fish actually won't bioaccumulate very much because most fish don't eat microscopic feeders. Right? There's a few tropical fish that may specialize into it, but the majority of the species, they kind of eat each other, right? And they're not into the clams and the bivalves and the snails and the mussels and the scallops and abalone and the razorback clams, the little next manillas, these are clams, or the oysters, or the different types of scallops. There's some periwinkles. There's incredible diversity, now gone thanks to the nuclear industry. And it's permanently gone. It's not coming back. Post Fukushima, we've done 6 years. The species didn't recover. They're gone, like most people's brains. This year, the bloom persisted into autumn, and this is highly unusual. Oh, nothing's unusual anymore now, is it? They're so used to mass die-offs now, people they don't even see it. It's catching all of us off guard. And that's unusual for them to... They usually try to blame it on your tin cans, your pop bottles, and your plastic, right? Last year also saw a deadly bloom take a toll on the sea life in Southern California. Thousands of sea lions and dolphins died in that event. The deadly bloom takes a toll of sea life. Well, the red tide bioaccumulates radiation, by the way, so anything that's at the top of that food chain is not going to be doing very good. But this wasn't normal pre-Fukushima at all. And so if you kill off, the first thing they kill off in the ocean with the radioactive fallout is the phytoplankton, which is the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestration chain. So now you're setting a stage for algae. There's no doubt about it. We know algae, some of these blooms are incredibly real. But why do they exist, and what else is going on there is conveniently omitted by the institutions, universities, the main so-called mainstream media. And what they've got done is pretty wicked. Just bear with me. All right. So let me explain radioactive fallout. Sometimes I gotta check it before I bring it over into this paint. So this is France's model of 1 million to 10 million atoms. So think of a snowstorm coming out of Japan's nuclear meltdowns. It's a continuous snowstorm that by day 20, that snowstorm covers the entire planet, but still hemorrhaging out of multiple nuclear meltdowns. And you're talking about 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137 that they're talking about. So there'll be 100 times more strontium-90, by the way. And the snowstorm, the radioactive fallout never goes away. And it never stops coming out of these China syndromes. Some of the reactors, like reactor 3, ejected the reactor core right out of the building and the fuel pools. And so when this happened, this hit all the freshwater, saltwater, and it didn't wipe out the entirety of the phytoplankton, which is the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain. But it mortally wounded it now. And so what happens is in a glass of water, you'd have 1 billion creatures. And 75 to 100 million would be the phytoplankton. But the rest of them is the eggs, the larvae, the small, the microscopic animals. And when I went back for 5 more years after covering the coastline and the species were missing, they didn't recover. That's meant they're gone, because if you plow in a healthy coastline, and it's hard. I'm sure it's hard to picture. So hang on a second, I can help you. So I went from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska, and there's 27,000 islands. So in the tidal zones to your left, that's what it should look like. And there's an awful lot of highly visible species in the tidal zones. The tidal zones are very vibrant from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska. This is what it would look like at low tide to your left, right? So when because the radiation killed all the other species, what we seen was, because they laid the eggs, right? See, all these species you're looking at would lay eggs, like a milky type of eggs. And the ocean, each spring, would turn into this big, I don't know how else to say it, but it was all the eggs of all the species. The tidal zones were incredible. 27,000 islands, tropical rainforest. You never had ice packs in the wintertime scrubbing the coastline. So the genetic superior selection species were in the 19-foot tide zone. There's a 19-foot tide exchange. There's a little bit more in some places. And I went back for 5 more years to see if this would fill back in. Because you can see that there. Now, if you took a bulldozer and plowed all that stuff and picked it up and put it in a dump truck and drove it away, the species down deeper and on both sides would just fill up the gap in a few months. See? Right? Species a little bit deeper would have crawled up and they would have filled that gap. And they didn't. And we know this because we've done it for 5 more years to see if the species recovered. And there was best was around 100 species that I found, but none of them were healthy. Okay, here we go again. So we left off right here. Poisoned by an oral toxin domoic acid. Again, it takes many years to quantify that assertion. Right, it has to go to laboratories. So this is the evidence that they presented. So nobody knows how that animal died, right? And if there was any predators, they would have picked that right to the bone, not just... in 2022, the peak of the domoic acid poisoning event lasted 37 days. And you shouldn't be getting the results back until this year, basically, for that one. In 2023, it expanded to 2 months. And this year, it had been 93 days and counting. But pre-Fukushima, it was typically just 3-4 days. 6 days would be crazy, but 37 days is not normal, see? Normal post-Fukushima, though. Climate change is altering the ocean's chemistry by acidifying the water absorbs increasing levels of carbon dioxide. It's simply not true. But, carbon dioxide means more phytoplankton, more species, more marine life, right? Not less. That could play a role, scientists say, but it can't because everything is carbon-based. And the whales that we're seeing, documenting relentlessly for many, many, many years now, particularly post-Fukushima, we've never seen pre-Fukushima, but post-Fukushima, we're seeing this symmetrical emaciations. Okay, so last year, explosion of sea lion deaths in Peru amid a deadly bird flu outbreak. So domoic acid is one of their cover stories. The other one now is the bird flu. I'm surprised they didn't try to blame the California one on bird flu. And this is a picture they show you. And when you look at this picture, this is clearly emaciation, not bird flu. Bird flu is allegedly, it's very quick, but it's never jumped to these species in the millions and millions and millions of generations born in these areas each year, generation after generation. We've never seen the bird flu jump to the species, so why in 2024 would it jump to the species? It just simply doesn't make any sense. And so when you look at this, because they're genetically superior, selected to live in that ecosystem, they're all the same. The explosion of sea lion deaths in Peru amid a deadly bird flu outbreak. But when to show you, and they show you two pictures, the next picture is pretty hard to look at too. And that one there's, this should be around 1,500 pounds. It's so emaciated. I've never seen nothing like it. I was a commercial diver with 14,000 hours under the ocean. I dove with these guys every day for years. And I don't know, I've never even seen anything like that. I wouldn't know how to describe it. If I found that when I was a commercial diver, I wouldn't know what it was. They're like, that's a new creature or something. What the hell is that? So this unbelievable emaciated animal, and this unbelievable emaciated animal, they're portraying it as the bird flu. This is the bird flu hoax, clearly. But it's a very dangerous thing to suggest that that's what a bird flu does to an animal. But it's convenient when the food chain is broken and the animals are showing up emaciated symmetrically throughout the continent. It's quite convenient, isn't it? An alleged surfer dies after she was impaled in the heart, of all places, by a swordfish, folks. A swordfish jumped out of the ocean and stabbed her in a leaping swordfish. Of all the ways to go. There's not one I pictured for anybody. But I guess why not? All my years on the ocean, I'm not looking past it. So let's just talk about some of this stuff. 2019-21 gray whale unusual mortality event was 10,350. Severe emaciations. U.S. biologists probe death of 70 emaciated gray whales. They're massive animals that can travel for the migratory route around 10,000 miles, which is exactly what they need to do and have no food when they left. They end up emaciated. They go through all their 10, 12 inches of blubber, right? But the total number was 10,350 is the consensus on that. Did a marine heat wave, now there's an unusual mortality event for quite a while for humpback whales too. It's still ongoing. But this number 7,000 is above, this is extra, this is above the unusual mortality event that they're already documenting. Severe emaciations. The same thing with the minke whales, unusual mortality event is still ongoing. And the North Atlantic right whale, unusual mortality event. The manatees, unusual mortality events. And killer whales. And seabirds, we were talking about that earlier. It wasn't tens of thousands, it was 1.4 million common murres, which dive 600 feet all day long. And so for them not to be able to find any food underwater or in the tidal zones is quite telling, really. Alaska seabird continues for another summer. So that was 2016. Everything was emaciated. Their stomachs are empty. In 2018, another is still full steam ahead. Emaciated and starved. In the United Kingdom, they're finding whales, dead whales. The largest mortality event of the species anywhere was over 100 that washed up, which meant at least over 1,000 covert beak whales, which shouldn't exist on that coastline. You should never see them because they're deep divers and they live way off the coastline. And they were showing up in all kinds of different stages of decomposition over their migratory route. This was the end of their route, and they didn't find any food, and they starved to death. They were emaciated. We covered that. And it's the same thing with the killer whales, except they got leukemia because they got so much radiation in their body. They're only producing white blood cells. 20,000 birds off the Dutch coast, they starved to death. And they're deep divers. They couldn't find their food. Alaska adds krill mussels to the list of unusual mortality events. 10 sperm whales die after stranding on the coastline. Whales won't stop killing themselves in New Zealand. And the numbers were horrific, right? And the Marshall Islands, of course, is one of the nurseries of the ocean. Over 1 million square kilometers is a nuclear wasteland. Alaska didn't get away with it either. It was equal to, the Marshall Islands was equal to equivalent to dropping 1.6 Hiroshima bombs every day for a dozen years. Remember, just one of the Castle Bravo bombs was equal to 1,000 Nagasaki bombs, like the one they dropped on, Japan. 2016-2021 humpback whale unusual mortality event, plus another 7,000 was discovered through camera pictures that they did show up in their migratory route. And so they were MIA permanently. And we covered the dead sea lions. And so the climate change played a role in 40% drop in the Pacific gray sea whales. Food scarcity / no food. They starved to death. 10,350. 8 dead sperm whales in German beach. 6 sperm whales in Australia. There was another 14 on another Australia beach last year. I showed you one just now with 10 in the United Kingdom. We've never seen anything like all these species. There's nothing in history. Insects are disappearing, and we should be very, very, very worried. Late last year, it came out 10 billion snow crabs had vanished off the Alaska coast. And this was equal 90% of the barren snow crab population, nearly 4 times. So 90% of the crabs are gone, which is 4 times the combined total number of snow crabs harvested by the fishery. And you see these people out there just load and go year after year after year, right on the Discovery Channel and everywhere else. Total number of snow crabs harvested by the fishery from 1977 to 2022. So 10 billion snow crab, an estimate, is 90% of the snow crab population and 4 times what they landed in their history. Just poof, because the food chain is broken, right? Time is running out. Like you say, I done the research expeditions, and the species to your left for 6 years never returned. What does that mean, I wonder? I know what it means, do you? The United States study radioactive xenon-133 in Washington was 450 times above detection levels after Fukushima and persisted for weeks. Which reminds me, did I even look at the poll tonight? Dana. Get your act together, Dana. Should it be a crime to murder millions of people in hospitals each year with man-made radiation? I don't know, Dana. Should that be a crime? I think it should be. I believe it should be. Just bear with me. Let me explain why we got that particular poll there tonight. Because there's a lot more to nuclear than just dead whales and seals and birds. They're killing you everywhere you turn. They're trying to kill you with radiation. And it's not illegal to poison you with radiation. Should it be a crime to murder millions of people in hospital each year? I'm going to explain that to you because you deserve better. You deserve to be able to live and enjoy your life and your loved ones, and you shouldn't have to. The most brutal way, and my apologies are to anybody that's having post-traumatic stress because I'm going through this stuff. It's understandable, and this is why I'm doing it so others don't. Introduction to radiation injury. Radiation injury. There's an interesting way to frame it. Radiation-induced injuries. Radiation-induced. And so that the whole theme coming up for the next few minutes is radiation-induced. So you go, say you got a tumor, you go there, well, there's nothing we can do for you. Oh, come on, doctor, can't you do something? Well, the healthcare in Canada gives $900,000 for radiation therapy. That's your only hope. Oh, yeah, no, I'll sign you right up. Here you go. Which is considered just enough to kill you. Radiation, they do the same thing in the States. They'll steal the kid from the family if they got cancer, and it's legislated that they have to get radiation therapy. When the kid's dying, then they'll send them home so you can all cry your eyes out together. Radiation-induced injury to the visual pathways. Radiation injury to the heart. That sounds like a whoop. Cardiac injury following treatment for breast cancer. So you go in to get radiation for one tumor and you end up with 5 or 6 more everywhere else. Radiation-induced cardiac injuries following treatment for breast cancer. Radiation-induced kidney injuries. Well, that sounds like fun. Hypoxia associated with chronic radiation-induced lung injury. Well, you produce so many white blood cells, you got no more red blood cells, just very few. So you need oxygen. The red blood cells carry the oxygen nutrition. The radiation kills all your cells. Your body has to repair all that. It does that with white blood cells, right? And starts reproducing if it can, if it didn't damage the bone marrow. For young people, you're at the stem cells, right? Which is radioactive now for most people. Blood spinal cord barrier disrupts the central nervous system. Because it's so subtle, it creates all these illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. Heart problems, liver problems, lung problems. But when you go into the hospital as a whole, there's a really insidious machine at work. A monster at work. Radiation-induced lung injuries. Let's keep going. Radiation-induced bowel injuries, my favorite. Laser treatment of severe radiation injury to lower intestinal tracts. Radiation-induced kidney injuries, breast radiation litigation, central nervous system radiation injuries, injury to the cranial nerves and the nuclei following proton beam. You don't want that stuff near you. Properties protect lungs from radiation-induced injuries. Let me go back to that. That's radiation injuries to the head and the neck. Assessments, like when you radiate your head, you get one tumor out. Now you got all kinds of tumors. The assessment of the radiation-induced brain injuries. There's so many of those studies. My goodness. They know what they're doing, see? They know it's genocide in every sense of that word. Quantification of radiation-induced regional lung injuries. Small bowel radiation injuries. Radiation-related breast injuries, that's their favorite, isn't it? Radiation-induced gastrointestinal syndrome. Radiation-induced brain necrosis. And I can play videos of the parents giving testimonies. that's such a brutal way to be killed. Radiation-induced normal tissue. Radiation-induced rectal injuries. Yay. Spinal cord recovery from radiation injuries. Radiation injuries to the aorta and branch arteries. Heart valves, right? Patients with radiation-induced bowel injuries. Radiation injury to the central nervous system. The radiation rectal injuries. Everybody's entitled to get radiation rectal injuries. Radiation lung injuries. Acute injury of salivary glands during radiation therapy. Radiation-induced liver disease. Radiation-induced bile duct injuries. Experiment study on acute brain radiation injury. Experimental study, really? As if all this is not an experimental study. That's what it is, right? Radiation is considered it's in a gray zone, right? It's not considered a cure. You got to sign a waiver, so if you die, your family can't sue the doctor for irradiating you. You're still radioactive after this stuff, by the way. Is they're going to put you in a special hospital room that's lead lined so you don't radiate the people in the hallway walking past. They call them the $1 million rooms, right? That's once you get assaulted with this stuff, this is what they do with you. Radiation-induced brain injuries. Radiation-induced brain injuries. Did I mention that? Radiation-induced brain injury. Did I happen to mention that as radiation-induced brain injuries? Modification in radiation-induced brain injuries. Brain stem injuries after intensive modulated radiation therapy. Radiation-induced brain injuries. Did I mention brain injuries from radiation? Did I mention language decline after brain radiation therapy? If you don't call it therapy, then they can't do it to you, right? So it's got nothing to do with therapy, though. How's this genocide got something to do with therapy? I wonder, because all of this is considered therapy, by the way. Everybody's like, yeah, can you kill my child with some of that therapy? Radiation-induced brain injury after radiosurgery of the brain. Radiosurgery. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. Recurrent brain tumors from radiation injuries. Study on radiation-induced brain injury after radiotherapy. You'll be good. I'm taking you to the hospital and get you radiation therapy. Oh, Mommy, I'll be good. I'll be good. Oh, my God. Hospitals die like all the other kids. That's the doctor. No, yeah. Well, we'll send the government. The government will take the kids if you don't bring them in. Okay, we're going to bring them in. No, Mommy, I don't want to go. We don't do it. We go to jail, son. Radiation-induced brain injuries. Novel clinical approaches to reduce brain radiation injuries. We even got studies there where they give you more radiation to resolve the radiation injuries you already got. It's like, oh my God. Like, it's hard to appreciate how evil you got to be to do what they're doing. It pays good money, but oh my goodness, what the hell? Because there's a certain amount of the population that are very sadistic people. They're very motivated too, right? Incredible education to go in and murder your children so they can make the big bucks. I give the nuclear industry credit, but they pay their misery machines well. Clinical approaches to reduce radiation injuries to the brain. Radiation-induced brain injuries. Did I mention that before? Did I mention brain injuries? Brain tumor progression from radiation injury after cranial irradiation. I shouldn't. I'm not laughing. It's the gallows laugh, because all of these studies are victims, right? And you won't believe how big of a folder of this stuff I actually got. I can't go through the folder because it blows my mind. It just wrecks my soul. And it's a very, very terrible thing to be exposed to. So I'm only showing you a fraction of what I actually got. I went for days and days. It started on the weekend. It didn't stop till around Thursday or something, just grabbing all of this stuff. And it was like a constant horror show. But by the time I got through it, I was like, okay, I get it now. There's some rabbit holes you don't want to go down. That was one of them, I can tell you. Ionizing radiation-induced brain injuries. And that's just why we got that poll tonight, because I went down that road. Should it be a crime to murder millions of people in hospital each year with man-made radiation? I figured the trolls would be. Normally trolls show up for those types of polls. Ionizing radiation induces brain injuries. Radiation-induced brain injuries. Did I mention radiation-induced brain injuries? I don't know if I did. How about radiation-induced normal brain injuries? Normal brain from radiation. It's normal! It's not a genocide, though. Not murder, Dana. Come on, Dana. We're just having a bit of fun on the slaves, on the plebes. All right, let's keep going. Did I mention test batteries for the assessment of radiation-induced brain injuries? You can get brain injuries from radiation. There's so many studies on it. I decided to throw a bunch in the pile. Mitigating radiation-induced brain necrosis, an experimental study. Well, just don't radiate the shit out of their heads. How about that? Now, there's a novel idea. Microwave-induced brain injuries. Oh, yeah. It comes from many different ways. Injuries to the brain from radiation therapy with whole brain. Brain radionecrosis after adjuvant radiation therapy. You got to call it therapy. So how can somebody call that therapy, though? How does that work? Like, if I open up a spa and I'm going to give you hand therapy and I beat the shit out of your hand with a hammer, that's assault, right? That's not therapy. But if you go, it's not illegal to do this to you. Like, Congress doesn't have the authority to make it illegal. Only the nuclear regulatory agencies have the authority in each country. And there's no way they're doing it. So it's out of Congress's hands, it's out of Parliament's hands, it's out of the Japanese Diet hands. It's 100% genocide. There's as clear-cut as it gets. Cognitive impairment in young patients treated with radiation therapy for a brain tumor. Treated with radiation. Treated in therapy, see? Yeah, okay, bring little Johnny in. We're going to treat him with some radiation therapy. Don't worry, he gets a lollipop. Too bad his brain won't let him figure what flavor it is, but so they make so much money, they just don't care. And this is the stuff that Dr. Geraldine Thomas does in the United Kingdom when she's not doing fake lectures on Fukushima claiming it's harmless. She's doing this to children. Aging mass detections of radiation-induced brain injuries. So as you get older, the injuries are showing up, but they write it off as dementia or autism or some illness you got from radiation in the first place. Radiation-induced soft tissue injuries to the head and neck. Does that sound like therapy? Does any of this sound late radiation rectal injury? It shows up later, rectal injuries from radiation. Does that sound like therapy? Does anybody think that's therapy? Surgical treatment of chest walls, radiation-induced injuries. So bad you got to get surgery. Radiation injury to the nervous system. Radiation-induced skin necrosis. The death of most of the cells in the organ or tissues. Radiation injuries to the canine spinal cord. So they knew a very long time ago. Very long time. Brain radionecrosis after adjuvant radiation therapy, acute radiation injuries, radiation-induced lung injuries, radiation injuries after post-operative radiotherapy of breast cancer patients. There's a whole litigation because at 10 million women, there was an extra 10 million women in 1 decade that had their breast removed that didn't have cancer. It was just a big. They had big scandal on breast implants too, right? All connected. They cut their breast off and then sell them the implants. Right? Just money. It's just corporate greed gone insane. Radiation-induced spinal cord injuries. Still going strong today, by the way. Radiation injuries to the growth plate. Therapy, right? Don't worry, though. It's therapy, so it's total normal, Dana. It's legal because it's therapy, according to some madman. Radiation-induced lung injuries, radiation pulmonary injuries, radiation injury into the intestine, radiation therapy-induced cardiac injuries, radiation therapy-induced heart attacks. Total theory. It's total therapy, though, Dana. They're being treated and with a therapy, Dana. Radiation injury to the central nervous system. Do you know of any other therapy that has this legacy? Like, there's no other therapy out there that gives you this legacy. Radiation injury to the spinal cord, radiation injury to the optic nerves, radiation injuries to the lower digestive tracts, to the human kidneys, radiation-induced cognitive impairment. Brain necrosis, right? And bone changes in the radiation, bone injuries, early change, radiation injuries to the nervous system. You see a lot of them, don't you? Radiation-induced insufficiency fractures of the femur 18 years after the radiation therapy. So when your therapy has all of these attributes, isn't it time to reconsider calling it a therapy? And what you're getting when you're eating food from Japan, this is what's happening to you. The same thing, by the way. What Japan done is insane. They continue to grow food in a nuclear wasteland right alongside of ongoing nuclear meltdowns. So let me bring this together. Too sweet for you now. So Dr. Raymond Gilmet, he was the lead author from Loveless Respiratory Research Institute in New Mexico, which is a United States Navy research facility. And they took 144 beagle dogs. He done 93 studies on beagle dogs and puppies. There's 3 tumors: lung, skeleton, liver. Started about 3 years after the exposures, because imagine a beagle dog, it takes a single inhalation, and 3 years later they've developed 3 different tumors typically. Bone tumors in 93 dogs were the most common cause of death. Out of 144 dogs, they all died. Bone tumors, which you can't get painkillers for bone tumors, is a nasty way to die. Lung tumors in 46 dogs were the second most common cause of death, and liver tumors were found in 20 dogs. But were the cause of death in only 2 dogs occurred later than tumors, bones, and lungs. So these were tumors in these 3 organs often occurred in the same animal were competing causes of death, and that these findings in dogs suggest a similar dose-related biological effect could be expected in humans accidentally exposed to plutonium-238. It was discovered that human kidneys were at least 50 times less efficient than an animal's kidneys were. So you're 50 times more vulnerable than the animal. And all the animals died in all the experiments. Curium isotopes was the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod, and you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for the plutonium. Okay. And this was 20-day plutonium fallout based on a fraction of the lost inventories that were actually lost. Even though they refused to acknowledge in Japan the reactor 3 and 4 when kaputs. And so these are incredible numbers we're talking about. So everybody's getting radiation therapy, all the insects, all the birds. Radiation-induced ocular injuries in dogs. Well, they know a lot about dogs, don't they? Surgical treatment of radiation injuries of the colon and rectum. Well, that sounds like a party. Microwave radiation injuries. Summary of symposium and acute radiation-induced injuries from radiation therapy. Summary Radiation induced in the dogs. Okay, so several decades after radiation therapy. Calling it radiation therapy, like if they cured a single animal with radiation, they would have put it in formaldehyde and put it on a big 18-wheeler, like a museum, mobile museum. They went around to every school in every town. They would have went, we cured that dog. So shut up. Okay, there's one more piece of information that's missing from this pile. I gotta go find it. So give me a minute. When I stop crying, then you know I found it. Oh, hey, I think we got it. That wasn't too humiliating. That's pretty good. I like that. All right, here we go. You like this part? Maybe you won't, of course. But so this was. I come over to the big window, the other window. Hang to. Stand down. 3% efficiency of chemotherapy treatment of cancer cures. 3%. Because don't forget chemo exists too, right? And there's also chemoradiotherapy, of course. But it's the same application for both of them. It was a 3% efficiency of living 5 years or more. The conclusions based on facts. This was a repeated study, by the way. Collected by the worldwide and peer-reviewed. But worldwide research was published in 2004. And under abstract, the following is printed. Results the overall contribution of curative and adjuvant chemotherapy to 5 years survival. Yeah, I'm sorry, because I haven't read it for a while. It was a 5-year survival in adults was estimated to be 2.3% in Australia and 2.1% in the United States. Everybody else died before the 5 years. Based on this extensive document, it is clear to state that we are losing the war on cancer. In fact, I believe that based on this clinical oncology document, it is safe to state that we have actually lost ground with our new and improved synthetic man-made chemotherapeutic agents. Therapeutic, again, the therapy narrative, right? Granted, the 3% in 1985 was horrific. All of our research dollars have resulted in a negative 33% further decrease in benefits. And perhaps everyone should contemplate and think of chemotherapy as an alternative route, and that you would be better off without the so-called therapy than you are with it. All right, back here. We're back here. Right there. Radioactive xenon-133 in Washington was 450,000 times above detection levels. After Fukushima. That one was supposed to be somewhere else. That was supposed to be down with this one. Xenon is known to cause a dramatic increase in lung cancer and bombards humans with very powerful X-rays. And Fukushima was the most ever recorded. So let me get back. And then the plume, the xenon-133 is this one, I think. Yeah, this one. This model. Which is one of the few models that don't cover the entire planet in 30 days. But in 20 days, it covered all of the northern hemisphere saturated. And we know that there was big numbers. We can quantify huge numbers of just the xenon-133. Half the people former Prime Minister said half the people in Japan were close to being evacuated. Well, everybody should evacuated from North America. And that's why you see these depictions of the media claiming they're in a building that don't exist, which is Reactor 4, which officially, they said, didn't melt down. Never lost any of the inventories. They said they got all the fuel out of the pool, and then they pretended this is just a fraction of it. I had a rough day today. I had to get the tool shed, organized because I got no counterspace. Workbenches are all completely loaded. And I got 4 different workbenches down there. And so it takes like 6 hours to get them clear so that I can get back on projects. But it took the good out of me. It's a good thing though. It'll make a big difference. Everything is back where it's supposed to be, so to speak. I got to change the chains on the front of the trailer. I got the chain anyway now, so I'm not worried about that. I got to hack it and then weld it onto the other piece so I'm not wasting any. So the building to your left, well, the stump of Reactor 4. The fuel pools are at the very top of these 190-foot, 19-story, 65-meter buildings. And if you think that they're in the fuel pool, I want you to call in. We haven't talked to our official idiot in a long time. So call in. We want to hear from you. We're in Canada, 709-589-4406. And explain to us how the fuel pool is at the top of the reactors. Because this is the worst story in human history, and everybody's completely complacent and refuses to understand and act appropriately on the enormity of the situation. You got to get educated, and you got to get vocal on top of that. The nuclear industry couldn't survive 100 people coming out and doing what I'm doing every day. It's falling apart now. There is no nuclear renaissance. This year in solar alone, not counting wind or geothermal or anything else, just solar, is 660 gigawatts expected of just solar worldwide. It's double the entire capacity of nuclear worldwide. Well, not double, but close to it. The total capacity of nuclear worldwide is 365 gigawatts. And solar almost doubled that this year. It'll double it next year for sure. In 12 months. It done that in 12 months. Like, why would you look at anything but geothermal anyway? You don't need gas, oil, and coal to back up wind and solar. You need geothermal. And if you put your mind to it, you can have 1,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures anywhere on the planet. It's right there under your feet, baby. All you got to do is look down. Some turn their backs, some wave their hats. And all you got to do is get vocal. So, a nuclear power plant breaks down and you might have to evacuate half your country. Because it's like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine, right? So when you see a headline like this, and this was my experience as the Prime Minister during the Fukushima nuclear disaster. This was Naito Kan, the Prime Minister of Japan at the time, of Fukushima event. This was an event. This is equally getting hit by a massive meteorite, except it takes a few decades to start playing out. Half the people in Japan were close to being evacuated after the start of the crisis. Half the people. Half your country. Permanently evacuated. And the reason they didn't evacuate it because he said that never happened. If that had happened, they would have to evacuate half the people in Japan. But it didn't happen. And then if you go to the Nuclear Regulatory, the International Atomic Energy Agencies, TEPCO, whatever, they're all going to tell you, all the universities, all the media is going to tell you that never happened. Right? And this is what they're going to tell you. Here we are at the top of reactor 4. Back! Back! Reactor 4. Some kumbaya shit going on there, right? There once was a reactor 4, they say. Okay, I'm going to play this clip. It was just funny as shit, right? This is some of the medias, the crazies. And this is just 4 of the many, many, many ones. We'll sing along with you. And they're going to tell you that they're 140 feet above the stump there, looking at the fuel pole, very dangerous, apparently. These people should be arrested, but it's not a crime to do what they're doing. It's not a crime to be a monster, and they knew that's why they went to university to get that job. Okay, I'll be back in a second.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
So you got to move them. Like, these people are saying they're on top of a building. This is the media. This is the producers, the management, the editors, the owners. All had to participate for that line of work. The hell was that? Slow motion or something? Does that sometimes. I don't know. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's do this. Where the hell is Dana? I'm here. Let me get my head a bit bigger. A little bit bigger. Hang on. Alrighty. Let me big hit. Half the people were close to being evacuated, but they didn't evacuate it because he said that didn't happen. That's pretty convenient. Oh, by the way, Reactor 3 may have had a second meltdown a week after the first, says the government report. Let's have a look here. Okay. No, it ejected the reactor core and the fuel pools right out of the buildings. Same as Reactor 4 done, right? New York Times, radioactive material like cesium were brought back to the surface soil each year by plant growth and pollination. Radioactive pollen, that's why you've seen the complete annihilation of the pollinators post-Fukushima. So Reactor 3 was unique because it ejected the reactor core and 4 decades of reactor cores from the fuel pools. And so Reactor 3 and Reactor to your left and Reactor 4 to your left, they put these contraptions on top of it. When you zoom in, clearly there's nothing there. And then they claimed they were in the building. So this is 2013, but in 2013, that's pictures over there of Reactor 4. A few months later, here we are, Reactor 4 getting the piss out of the fuel. I used to do skits where I would piss into the fuel pool in the background on the green screen, right? And we used to play those clips. But radiation experts is terrified how the Pacific ecosystem has collapsed since Fukushima. Plutonium, uranium suspected of spreading throughout the food chain. Yes, Cecilia Vega got, which was the ABC correspondent, which is the biggest media in Australia. was promoted to BBS and CBS, and she's the correspondent for the White House too, right? She was the press club at the White House last year, and she makes $1 million a year being a monster. It's totally legal to come out and destroy your health and destroy your communities for these people. It's totally normal. Thanks, Dana. Yeah, if you're a monster, then you be consentive, make sure the truth never comes out, right? So these 14 prefectures were banned by 55 countries for over a decade. And Japan didn't give a shit. They never stopped growing food, and they just sent to other prefectures, relabeled it, and then shipped it off to you. That's why everybody you know is getting sick or is sick. New Zealand, whales won't stop killing themselves in New Zealand. That one cracks me up. There was an amazing amount that year. 2018 showed up dead on that. This was a Neptunium-239 dispersal. And you can see how dangerous this stuff is. These amounts, you can't detect them, right? Children start to have heart problems at 11 atoms a kilogram. And so the atom is what creates the BQ, which is a Becquerel, which is a pulse of energy, almost at the speed of light. It wrecks your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells. Your body has to repair all of that every second. We're talking huge numbers destroyed because it's pulsing at the speed of light. And then your body has to attack the source, which it does for the rest of your life with white blood cells, eventually builds a tumor around it. So there's 100% cause and effect from the infestation, from being infected. And the scientists in the 50s described radioactive fallout as a biological weapon because of those particular attributes. There was 1 million atoms per square meter on the west coast after the reactor's explosion. And a private email reveals highest levels of government worried about the health impacts in the United States. Nuclear industry tries to bury the truth. And Berkeley experts even claim they told the public there is no plume. This was a Neptunium-239 plume dispersal based on 20 days. There was another study of 20 million, it was actually 20 million particles. The particles are much worse than the actual atom. Of radioactive iodine-131 per liter fell in the U.S. during post-Fukushima peak. There was another study showing the West Coast was 1 million to 10 million atoms. This was the French government of cesium-137, which pulses energy 600 feet every second. That model is based on 8 days after the tsunami. This model at this point here is based on 20 days. It's just the same government. And they're talking about 1 million to 10 million atoms per square meter, or what they considered normal, which was post weapons testing, right? There was a lot of radioactive fallout still present worldwide. It's got a 300-year life, right? And so it could have been 30 million atoms or 40 million atoms per cubic meter of air in this model here. And that's 20 days. So that's all of these different isotopes. You can live in denial for one of them or live in denial for another one. You can't live in denial for every one of these I'm showing you, all these studies. And the fact that the lowest levels of radiation are harmful to life. So imagine what it's like to birds and insects and the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain. So then they were spraying salt water on these enormous temperatures, meltdowns, and that was separating sulfur from the salt water, which had this unique facet, this unique property that they were aware of in the 60s and that from the ocean nuclear bomb detonations, was this sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyball type effect. A radioactive sulfur, neutrons, another study showed 360 atoms being sequestered in the testicles every single day. And so this is why you see all the species disappeared, because they were sterilized, and that manifests in over a few generations. And so they have more species or more reproduction than we do, right? Like a baby bird this year can have babies next year, but a baby human couldn't, right? For decades. So it shows up and manifests in the lower species, or some people might say the higher species, because they don't destroy the planet. An unprecedented phenomenon from using salt water forming new uranium compounds that can travel very long distance right around the planet without the jet streams, like carbon buckyballs. And uranol peroxide enhanced nuclear fuel corrosions in seawater created these spherical balls from the sulfur. That's the sulfur. And then they can ingest uranium, plutonium, americium, curium, etc., isotopes, and become super hot particles and can travel incredible distances. Solid and insoluble in water, and the impact on the human health needs to be examined. Well, if you do that, then they got to get away from nuclear, so they won't do it. Peroxide formed by seawater and melted fuel, even more likely to react with the elements in the core. So the peroxide, sulfur, peroxide, hydrogen buckyballs reacts with the elements, which is uranium, plutonium, and americium, and becomes super hot particles. And Neil deGrasse Tyson even talked about the hydrogen sulfide and buckyballs. So it's sulfur, peroxide, hydrogen, buckyballs is how I ended up coming up with it. An unprecedented phenomenon from using salt water. Well, the only reason they used salt, the reactors were gone, so they used the salt water just to lull people into complacency, and it worked. People bought into it. And today, even, you can't have a conversation with the average person. Top radiation experts, 50 atoms a kilogram in humans lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organ. Irreversible lesions in the vital organs. 220 million atoms per liter of iodine-129 in rain after Fukushima, with a 15 million year half-life. So an anthropogenic man-made isotope, say it's 129, these are going to pulse energy every minute, or every second in some cases, right? Nuclear radiation is the most carcinogenic thing that exists on top of that. And this plume model, by the way, is 19.5 days, 468 hours. And I think that's the Krypton 85, which changes in the strontium 85, I think. I can't remember now off the top of my head. Map shows Fukushima followed in the United States. Radiation dose in northeastern Great Lakes equal to the west coast. Well, it can't be an 85 and an 85. It got to be something else, right? Child's risk of cancer from radiation is 10 to 100 times higher than an adult who had the same exposure. It's actually thousands of times, because you radiate their thyroid gland, they're producing radioactive hormones forever. And if you're doing that, then you're also irradiating their skeleton, which means they're producing radioactive stem cells for the rest of their lives too. And they're developing, right? So this is even more catastrophic in the species. And there was someone sent me a study this morning. And I'll introduce it to you guys once I get back at it, right? Today was a really busy day for me. And it's how it affects the animals is much worse than what we talk about, it turns out. So it's even worse. They're so insane, they're growing food right alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation in a nuclear wasteland, surrounded by thousands of square miles of a nuclear wasteland. They're within sight of the reactors, growing food right alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation. I can't possibly wrap my mind around it. And I've been at this forever. I still can't wrap my mind around it. It still blows my mind. And they know that there's endless studies, millions and millions of studies showing how plants suck up radiation. So why is every nuclear power plant surrounded by farms? Inhaling just one hot particle or eating it or drinking it can cause a cancer. Well, there's many other issues and illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses that will manifest, not just cancer. Cancer will show up too on top of it. Before Fukushima, 100 atoms a kilogram of cesium is nuclear waste, but after 100 atoms a kilogram of cesium is safe to eat. The numbers pre-Fukushima for safety in Japan was 0.1 atom per kilogram, or 1 becquerel per kilogram, 1 decay per kilogram. Now it's they only acknowledge cesium, and obviously they're not looking. If you're only going to acknowledge one, that means you're not looking at it on the other ones, and that means you're not looking for that one either. The last thing you want to do is eat food from a nuclear wasteland. You might think you get away with it for a decade, but then it's going to come back, and you're going to liquidate your assets trying to save your health. Top radiation experts, 50 atoms a kilogram in humans lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organs. Yeah, I seen there's a comment there by James Lucid. Probably went over most people's heads. Let me look that back up. We were talking about I was showing pictures from my research expeditions. And James Lucid, I put a comment there, said you can stuff it in the back of a SUV. And we had made that statement many years ago, James. Good call. And what we found on the research expeditions for 4 months, you could have fit all of it in the back of an SUV. The species. There was nothing. There was no color on any beaches. And there was commenters, when I was on the ocean doing the research expeditions, and we were posting the pictures online whenever we were going in the communities, right, to get fuel or whatever, and food. You had to do that every 9 days, 10 days, 12 days. So you would find internet and upload a bunch of pictures. And there was people going around on YouTube videos about Fukushima saying that I had 45-gallon drums of bleach, and I was going and taking small islands and bleaching it, and then we would come back later and take pictures of a naked island, because that was the only way it could be naked. Because they acknowledged, see, that the species were incalculable. It was just I usually describe the west coast of British Columbia as enough protein that you can cream the species along the coastline, not damage it due to about 3% of the species. It was enough protein to feed the entire planet in the tidal zones. And you would never hurt it. It was completely replenishable. Because, when you were diving, you get to really see it, right? And you understand the incredible enormity of what you're dealing with. Now you can do the whole coastline, and whatever's left you can fit in the back of a SUV. Whatever you can find after 4 months. There's nothing. There's no starfish. There's no mussels. There's no scallops. There's no abalone. There's no there should be 480 species of worms. There should be 84 species of sponges. There should be 78 species of starfish. There should be 76 species of sea anemones, like the giant plume sea anemones. Used to be the most visible thing when you come to the coastline. There is incredible diversity. There was over 5,500 invertebrates without the backbones and the 700 algae. Naked. You will starve to death if you're shipwrecked anywhere on that coast of 27,000 islands. You will actually starve to death. And there's no sound in the forest. It's the most insane thing you can experience. And the reason is because radiation material from radioactive fallout is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. The reason the whales are dying is because the food chain is broken. I explained all that at the beginning. Go back and watch the beginning of the show. UN committee chairman studying Fukushima radiation impact. We wouldn't expect to see health effects in children, workers, or anybody else. It was 865,000 cancers in the first year. And not everybody got diagnosed. Not everybody got health care. Not everybody gets cancer. Not everybody was looking for it, right? And the health system in Japan is already overrun. And here's another one to think about. Obesity rates nearly doubled Japan's average. An excessive weight gain after nuclear crisis and marker radiation brain damage. So the study, Fukushima is the most serious man-made disaster in human history. And obesity rates have now nearly doubled Japan's average. So when you see brain necrosis and all those studies earlier, they were getting it from consumption, from breathing the air and drinking the water in Japan. Japan should have been abandoned. Extreme increases in mortality caused by cardiac diseases in Fukushima. Death rates might give the creeps to some people. In a single month, there was an extra 12,700 people died of heart attacks. It was a 7.7 spike in cancers and 14.6% spike in cardiac diseases in a single month. It's the same thing with 865,000 people getting cancers in a single year. What was the catalyst? Radiation in small doses could actually be disproportionately worse. And thyroid cancer risk lasts your entire lifetime. Leukemia peaks in a few. Thyroid abnormalities in 55% of the Fukushima girls tested age 11 to 15. So if you destroy the female population, you destroy the population, right? So imagine, because humans are at the top of the food chain, right? So imagine the insects, the birds, the mammals, and the animals are going to have these same particular attributes, but it's going to be infinitely worse because their reproduction cycle is quicker. And you have to protect the female of all species, not just humans, but you have to protect humans and all species. Fukushima girls have 3 times more thyroid tumors over 50 millimeters than the boys, and 79% more medium-sized tumors than the boys. And because the thyroid is only 2 by 3 centimeters, or 3 by 5 centimeters for an adult, but 2 by 3 for a kid, right? And so the tumors are around 2 centimeters. I think we get that coming up in a minute. Human embryos in the United States, which means they're producing pure radioactive hormones for the rest of their life. Human embryos in the United States likely bioaccumulating radioactive iodine, cesium, and strontium. Well, which means they're bioaccumulating curium, plutonium, uranium. Now, 35.8% of the Fukushima children have thyroid tumors, and nearly 1 in every 3 kids tested. 30% in Fukushima now had tumors of 2 centimeters. Thyroid glands are only 5 by 3 centimeters, but that's for an adult. And because they lie so much, right? But the statistics, when you look at what they're talking about a kid's thyroid, which at best is 2 by 3 centimeters. So a 2 centimeter cyst is a tumor. That's a tumor. It's a small tumor, but it's a tumor, right? Now, pre-Fukushima, the numbers were 1 in a million, to 2 per million. So these numbers, which is 13,646 out of 38,000, when you scale it up to 358,000 out of a million. And so if you're going to have these manifestations, you're going to have many more different manifestations, because the thyroid is producing radioactive hormones, and because there's so much radiation to create that atmosphere, then you can literally quantify by suggesting that all of them are also producing radioactive stem cells, which is catastrophic for development, right? Anthropogenic man-made radioactive hormones and anthropogenic man-made radioactive stem cells. And so if you look at Chernobyl, which is a fraction, less than a fraction of Fukushima, it was brutal. Don't get me wrong, it was brutal. But it's just a fraction of what Fukushima's inventories were. It was a graphite reactor. It was a new reactor. Fukushimas were old reactors, pure uranium, pure plutonium. And they were massive. And at the top of the buildings was fuel pools with decades of reactor cores. Chernobyl never had that attribute and was a new reactor. But Chernobyl was nasty, as you can imagine. Under 3% of the children exposed to Chernobyl radiation while in the womb were diagnosed as healthy at the age of 7. Only 3% at the age of 7. That doesn't mean they're going to be healthy at the age of 10. 3 million children require permanent treatment because of Chernobyl. Many will die prematurely. And that was UN Secretary General Kofi Annan in 2000. If that's not a frightening statistic, what is? Because we're talking about Fukushima is just brutal amount. It dwarfs Chernobyl in every facet spectrum. Columbia medical professor inhaling just one hot radioactive particle can cause a cancer. 43% of the kids' thyroid abnormalities, new Fukushima City test results. / tumors, right? Modes of exposures, there's many different modes. And when they only acknowledge iodines and cesiums, for instance, and not all the other stuff, right? For every iodine 131, there's 10 times more iodine 132, 30 times more iodine 133, 31 times more iodine 129. For every cesium 137 after the first 1,000 days, it's a 100-to-1 ratio of strontium-90, which is a bone seeker, like plutonium. Fox is iodine 131 killing babies in Philadelphia. Death rates are 50% since radiation levels spiked in tap water. So if you got a spike of iodine 131 in your tap water, and you did, and 129, and 132, and in cesium and everything else. And we got the studies, we showed it to you earlier, right? And then there was another one. Is the increase in baby deaths in the United States a result of Fukushima fallout? A federal training manual referred to sickened nuclear workers as Freddy Krueger. So to be totally ostracized so that you couldn't blame it on the industry, right? How the brainwashing was done in Fukushima report paints a propaganda effort by the Japanese government and the British and the Canadian and the Taiwanese that would make Goebbels and Edward Bernays proud. Lecturer tells parents Tokyo radiation not so serious and let kids play outside. Just gargle and wash your hands. Simply, that's completely inappropriate because parents wouldn't let their children go outdoors for almost 2 years. And they were smart. So this was February 2nd, 2012, right? Goes, just gargle. In 9 months later, November the 9th, 2012, same year, Smalling mascot asked Fukushima kids to gargle to stay safe from radiation, and that the radioactive sparkles on happy children. And they had this grinning bird mascot. Cartoon bird warns Fukushima children of radiation. They had to take it down because of the blowback. But look at this. So gargle water, wash your hands, and radioactive sprinkles. I mean, they printed up something like 150,000 of these little pamphlets and distributed it to schools before they finally stopped. This is insane, horrific brainwashing we're talking about. Nuclear radiation, the most carcinogenic thing that exists, bar nothing. Anthropogenic man-made radiation. Scumbag Gunderson moves south of the equator if Unit 4 fuel pool goes dry. Now, we played this video last night and I disappeared for 7 minutes, was it? So I re-recorded it, but that's the same one, just in case that had any issues. I don't know how. But let's play this one.
Unit 4 has always been my biggest concern. If you watched our website, on the very first week of the accident, I was saying that if Unit 4 were to catch fire, you'd have to evacuate Tokyo.
So Arnie is suggesting that the building looks like the one to the left, not the one to the right. And he was in the same stories as the people to the right, faking that the fuel pool existed. Arnie Gunnison did. Japan Times column. As the public, possibly worldwide, sickens over time, the truth will come out about Fukushima. And where am I to? Cataclysmic die-off of birds on the entire west coast, 2015. I was on the ocean doing research expeditions at that time. It's tragic. We've never seen anything like it. Beaches covered with dead bodies. Over 1 million Cassini or common murres. That's that particular story was referring to. 2017, 2 years later, massive die-off of sea creatures from California to Alaska. Animals are starving. I was on the ocean during that one too, on a 5-month research expedition. Species counts. And they were totally exterminated. Animals starving as food chain continues to collapse. Mass starvation event of all species. This broken food chain. And I laugh, and that's the gallows laugh. It's an involuntary laugh rather than scream, right? So reactor 3, just that alone, is worse than all nuclear meltdowns in history combined. This was the plutonium mixed oxide reactor. It would be the end of the world. Experts warn of a collapse of the Fukushima reactor. Well, it's not a collapse. This was a detonation. Ejected the fuel pools and the reactor cores right into the buildings. They're talking about reactor 2. And what's right alongside, so it would be the end of Japan if reactor 2 blew up. But right alongside it was reactor 3, and on the other side of that was reactor 4. They're gone, but don't worry about that. Worry about reactor 2, which looks like it's pretty good shape. Excuse me. Making Tokyo area uninhabitable if reactor 2 was destroyed. Well, what about reactor 3 and 4? I mean, reactor 3 was a Medusa. This is a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. The emissions are 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. And the building to your left is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. And once you take the fuel out of the reactor in that one, put it in a pool, it's insane emissions. It's criminal. It's the most criminal thing conceivable because it's splitting atoms. You can't contain it. It's vented all day into the environment. That's why they're surrounded by farms. The common spent fuel pool, the documentation suggests clearly that the common spent fuel pool is gone. When you look at reactor 4, which is in front, that's 4 sides of it. But these people pretend they're in reactor 4. That's 2013, but that's 2013. The fuel pools were at the very top of this building. It was 140 feet above that stump. All right. A chilling photo comparison of Chernobyl and Fukushima. And because we got jacked last night, I had to do the show again tonight just to make sure. I got a total of 48 views tonight. 48 views. According to Google, if you believe those people. Pretty crazy though, isn't it? They don't censor me enough, do they? They don't have anybody else really that's doing educational programs. And so they got no one to pick on. they being 1,000 public relation firms, they only make money if they got a problem, right, to cover up. It looks like I fit that bill for them, apparently. Just bear with me. Yeah, okay, so I think we'll call it a nighty night. It's not too bad, hour and 40 minutes. Last night we were over 2 hours. I got pounded on the views again tonight, and for the last month now they've been just gouging me. Same nuclear show we've been doing for over a decade straight. When all the stars are lined up, we're doing these shows. The idea is just to keep pressure on the industry, right? And getting 200 views now is almost impossible. Like a miracle. They took down my other site with 24,800 subscribers. I had 24,800 subscribers for 5 years. Never lost one, never gained one. That's pretty good, I think. That's pretty good. So then I was out looking for spiders in a research expedition, which are missing. 500,000 per acre are missing. Who cares? Never was that many spiders, Dana. Post Fukushima, maybe. 400 miles out into the woods by myself on a research expedition. Pop! There goes my YouTube channel. No emails, no nothing. So we started this one up. This one is incredibly censored. We're like guinea ducks for them, I guess. Guinea pigs or something for them. Alrighty, let's come in and close the poll down. Call her a night. Hello, everybody. One poll, one bourbon, one beer. Should it be a crime to murder millions of people in hospitals each year with man-made radiation? Oh, hell yeah. Do I get a hell yeah? I think everybody participated. Yeah, Dana said it right. There is a lot going on, but Fukushima supersedes everything. Fukushima is a real nasty event. You got to be careful of everything you're eating, for goodness sakes. You got to be careful every time you have an earthquake in Japan, because you could reignite the meltdowns to send another plume your way. Like, what it's done is inconceivable, and it's undeniable, if you're honest. If you're honest, then you're in the best position. Because knowing the truth means you can make informed decisions that might affect you and your loved ones forever in a bad, bad way, right? So if you're not aware of avoiding everything from Japan, if you do that alone, you're done better than the average person, because this industry is insane. We'll see everybody tomorrow night on Tuesday's show, hump day for us. We start our shows on Sunday. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. You have a great day. Tomorrow, we'll see everybody on the next show. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you made it this far. We're going to let one of James Luce's songs. He created about a troll that lost her minds when James posted it. Trolls lost their minds. Has been trolling me, one in particular, been trolling me for over a decade straight. That we named Calm Down Charlie. We'll see everybody on the next show. You have a great night. Have a great day tomorrow. Hugs for everybody, and best wishes to you and your loved ones.
In the Tokyo Bureau, swirling smoke and neon beams. Chicago division fueled by heated dreams. Calm down, Charlie calls in, voice smooth as silk. Says, Dana, you're dreaming, don't cry over spilt milk. On Dana Durnford show, the chatter's turning wild, but Charlie shoots it down with that cool cat style. Unit 3's no killer, no harm to sea life. He chuckles in the static, cuts through the strife. Oh, calm down, Charlie, with his nuclear charm. He says starfish are just fine, there's no alarm. His words dance on airwaves with a confident glow. Calm down, Charlie steals the whole radio show. With a snap and a grin, Charlie's voice so clear scatters the dread, dispels all the fear. Mux didn't hurt, he croons with a sigh. Science is for thinkers, not a whim or lie. Though Dana and the crowd may shout and roar, Charlie's unfazed, he's heard it all before. His swinging rationale, like a soothing song, says, hold on to logic, we gotta stay strong. Oh, calm down, Charlie, with his nuclear charm. He says starfish are just fine, there's no alarm. His words dance on airwaves with a confident glow. Calm down, Charlie steals the whole radio show.